For today's video, looks a little different. We've got a real world scenario. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with hardware, it's really hard to simulate that in a virtual machine a lot of the time, especially troubleshooting. And one of the most common things that you'll want to do with your Linux system is install proprietary drivers. Well, you don't want to do that, but often you are cornered into doing that. And one of the most common scenarios is the drivers for NVIDIA graphics cards. They're distributed as a binary closed source blob. So if you want the best functionality from your graphics card for games and things like that on Linux, you're going to be installing the binary NVIDIA driver. Now there is an open source NVIDIA driver. It's called Nouveau. It works reasonably well, but it's not really, well, you can't really use it for gaming all that much. You can't really use it for some of the advanced features of your graphics card. So we've got this machine set up here. It's an i5 with 3 graphics cards, like a GT 460, GTX 460, GT 630s. Just got 3 graphics cards, so it's a really unusual setup. And the reason that I've got it set up this way is to show you how to install the proprietary NVIDIA driver, but also how to deal with things when things go wrong. Now, a lot of this we've already covered, but not in this context. And so I sort of want to thread the needle with everybody and show you how you can use some of the stuff that I've showed you to solve a problem, while also learning some new tricks along the way, some nuances about using some of the stuff that I've showed you. Because hopefully you're reading the man pages and hopefully you're going through the documentation. I'm not, the words from my mouth are not everything that you need to know. You're going to have to read, you're going to have to study, you're going to have to do a lot of furious Googling. That's just the way that it is. Welcome to technology. Welcome to Linux system administration. Welcome to your own personal system administration. All right, what are we working with here? Well, this is my default out-of-the-box configuration with Fedora 27. So I've installed Fedora 27 on this machine. We've already gone through the installation. Don't need to waste your time with any of that. Right now, this machine is using the Nouveau driver, but it also has an Intel iGPU, the whatever comes with Haswell. This is a Haswell i5 CPU, so it's got a built-in Intel iGPU, and there is a BIOS setting for enabling the iGPU. Most of the time, the defaults on most motherboards is that if you install a graphics card, it disables the built-in graphics card because the built-in graphics card will use some of your system memory, and most people don't want that. On this particular machine, it's enabled, just so I can show you a couple of things. Now, this machine also has 6 monitors. Yeah, 6 displays, all connected with DisplayPort. Technically, this computer has 8 outputs, but the NVIDIA driver is not super forgiving about mixing different kinds of graphics cards in all scenarios. And also, the X Windows stack on Linux is not really super forgiving about mixing different kinds of graphics cards either. In fact, I could not get the Intel graphics card to work simultaneously with all 3 NVIDIA graphics cards from this exotic configuration. So, okay, now the first thing that I'll caution you on is if you have a lot of monitors, GNOME is going to be problematic at best. I've installed LightDM. It's just, DNF install LightDM, yum install LightDM from the Fedora package manager. You should know that. But before we get to arranging the monitors, we just need to do away with Nouveau and install the NVIDIA driver. So the first order of business is going to the NVIDIA website and downloading the driver. This is really unusual. This should, like alarm bells should be going off in your head, because it's like, wait, don't I use the package manager for everything? And at the 100 level course, yes, you probably should be using the package manager for everything. While you can download and compile your own source, and that is totally cool, I would suggest that until you're really comfortable with the command line, that you not download random crap from the internet. And yet here we are, downloading random crap from the internet. So once you're done downloading, you'll have an executable that you need to run in order to install the driver. And you just open up a terminal window and just do /NVIDIA. In this case, the driver version is 390.25. And it's going to do some stuff, and then it's going to say, whoa, you're a regular user. You got to run this as root. It's like NVIDIA installer must be run as root. Okay. We'll run it as root. It's like, oh, you appear to be running an X server. Please exit X before installing for further details, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So we can do Control-Alt F2 in this case, and get a text mode terminal, and then we can stop X. So you can do service GDM stop to stop the GNOME display manager, service LightDM stop to stop the LightDM service. You get the idea. Now, I'd already switched to LightDM before the video. You may still be running GDM. That's cool. You may not have 6 monitors, and so if you don't have 6 monitors, you're totally going to be fine with GNOME. So now that we've stopped it, Let's go to home, /home, and Wendell, and downloads, and run the NVIDIA thing again. So this run of the NVIDIA installer failed. We've got to reboot. So I just typed to reboot. Oh, and things got a little quieter. Oh, he's trying. Now at this point when you reboot, depending on your system, any number of things could happen. The screen could flash for what seems like forever because some joker thinks that it's a really good idea to make the thing try to restart 100 times when it fails to start up correctly. System D or whatever, or X, I don't know. It's really annoying. It seems to be the default on pretty much all distributions of Linux. I don't like it. And if you change it, it just changes right back. It's like, System D, when something fails, just let it try 3 times. But I digress. So right now I've got just a big black nothing on my screen. Like literally nothing is happening. So I'm going to try to hit Control F2, F1, F2, F3, F1, F2, F3. Nothing is happening. If I hit caps lock on the keyboard, nothing happens. Now the reality is that I could actually remote into this machine over the network. And so if you've installed SSH using the package installer and set up SSH for remote access, then you could still get into this machine and still do stuff with it. That is a good idea. That is definitely a good idea so that you can do things. But this is one of the things that people complain about on Linux all the time. And this is why I wanted to show you in this tutorial, because I've shown you the skills, but I haven't really put it together for you. I haven't really shown you the step-by-step. And so it's like, oh, it's broken. What do we do now? It's like, well, gotta turn it off, turn it back on. Okay, so we are at our grub command prompt. We need to edit this. So we're going to do edit to edit this. And we're going to go down to the Linux line. Remember? So it's like, okay, we've got Fedora root, blah, blah, blah. Somehow we ended up with rd.driver.blacklist equal nouveau in our command line. This might be good for you if you're having trouble to add this rd.driver.blacklist equal nouveau to your command line. But we're also going to add the keyword single to the end here. That'll boot up in single user mode, and it'll prevent anything X related from running. And then we're going to do Control X to start. Now one thing to note is that you may notice there's a backslash at the end of the lines. The backslash means that it's just one line. So you've got one line of text, but this monitor is too narrow to display it on one line. So you'll see this convention in a lot of Linux and Unixes, where you get to the line and then you got backslash, and then you got another line. If you've got a long string, sometimes it's really handy just to format it, and you can add a backslash before you even get to the end of the line because you know you want it on the next line, just to make things more readable. And so in this case, the blacklist equal nouveau, the backslash, don't read into the backslash. It's just that there wasn't enough room on the line, so it went to the next line, and the backslash is letting you know all that is on one line. Confusing, I know, but you'll get used to it. So the machine didn't lock up, but also no video. Probably what's happening is all of the graphics are going to the integrated GPU, which it doesn't have any monitors hooked up to it. So I'm just going to hit Control Delete, reboot the machine again. Again, this is meant to illustrate sort of worst case scenario. Most of the time installing the NVIDIA drivers is not this bad. So in addition to single, we're going to add the line no mode set, which means that it won't change the graphics mode. And then it's going to say, hey, give me the root password for maintenance. Now we can go to /home, /my username, /downloads with a capital D, and run the NVIDIA installer, /NVIDIA, blah, 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 tab to complete, accept the license. It's like, would you like to register the kernel module with DKMS? This will allow DKMS to build a new module if you install a different kernel later. I'm going to say no because I'm pretty sure that's not going to work in Fedora 27. It's like, oh, the GCC version is not the same. It's fine. We can ignore that in this case. That's not always the case, though. Would you like to install NVIDIA's 32-bit compatibility libraries? Yeah, I think so. We'll just go with the defaults, because why not? Would you like to run the NVIDIA Xconfig utility and automatically update your Xconfig so that NVIDIA X driver will be used when you restart X? Yes. And it will back up your configuration, although when you go get it, you'll have to get it from the command line. All right. Now at this point, we reboot again. On this boot, we should not need any custom anything. So now you know the difference between NVIDIA and Nouveau. Let's talk about something called Zenorama. Zenorama is not an NVIDIA technology, but Zenorama is something that lets you run multiple desktops and displays. So you think about, you've got a single graphics card with multiple outputs. should that be presented to the system as one big virtual desktop, or should that be presented as two independent displays? Well, in the past, when you had independent graphics cards, you would have basically two independent X servers running on each one, and you had to do software magic to move stuff between them. And so Zenorama sort of gives you a little bit of that magic. So we've got multiple graphics cards here, but they're not enabled. They're not actually going to use anything. We need to fix that. Allow me to introduce the NVIDIA-X settings utility. It's a really handy utility for configuring all this stuff. We can see our other graphics cards in here and enable them. So here we can see that it does detect all 6 of our monitors, but it doesn't really know what to do with them. So it says configuration disabled. So new X screen, new X screen. So our 2 on top are these 2. Yeah, it does that sometimes. Oh no, I can't move my mouse cursor over there. So we do want to enable Zenorama. And this will save a new configuration to our Xorg. Now, even though this utility is also super squirrely in that this is the way that I have my monitors arranged, this display and then this one, and then these 2 are actually stacked on the end here. I can't actually arrange it this way with this utility. I'm going to have to go into the configuration file and arrange it manually because welcome to Linux, I guess. Now, notice that the xorg.conf doesn't make any mention of our Intel graphics card. And we can see that we've got screen 0, screen 1, and screen 2. Really, those are graphics cards. And, you know, their orientation. And we would have to manually update their orientation in this file. And we can see that we've got the monitors that are defined here, the Dell 1909Ws, which, you know, are not great monitors. We see we've got a 460 SE, a 440, and a 630. Those are the graphics cards in their system. This is what the NVIDIA utility has put here for us to make our life a little easier. We can see that SLI is off, multi-GPU is off, base mosaic is off, color depth 24 bits. And so we may have to manipulate this text file in order to get our configuration and our monitor placement exactly perfect because the GUI doesn't really do it. Now the good news is that if you've got 2 or 3 monitors, you're not going to have this problem. It's just that if you've got 6 monitors, it's a little bit more problematic. To confirm that everything is working, we do a ls mod grep NVIDIA and see that yes, NVIDIA is loaded, not Nouveau, for all of the stuff that we need for our video driver. And there you have it. You can install the proprietary NVIDIA driver. And if you've got more modern NVIDIA cards, you know, you can play games and things like that. These are probably too old to play anything even relatively recent, unfortunately. The other thing you got to be careful about is what graphics cards you have, because if you got older graphics cards or you're mixing really old graphics cards with really new ones, it's not going to work. The NVIDIA driver stopped supporting older cards, and so you've really got to use the web GUI or a lot of furious Google searching in order to figure out which driver version supports what card. Again, this was 390.25, so it's a pretty recent version, at least at the time of this video, and it still supports the GT440, GT630, GTX 460 SE, which are the cards that we're using in this system. Now, this was kind of like, I mean, on other operating systems, it's basically plug and play. You just plug everything in, you arrange your monitors, and you're good to go. And that's basically true on Linux too, if you're dealing with 2 or 3 monitors and a single graphics card. Where we've got multiple graphics cards here, there are unresolvable configuration problems and unresolvable dependency problems. Remember, for whatever reason, if we enable the Intel GPU when booting, the whole system will hang. Or if we try to mix the Intel GPU with the NVIDIA settings utility, it will basically fail. This is just sort of basic functionality gaps that exist in Linux. That's why Linux is not really super popular on the desktop. These kinds of features, these kinds of things frustrate desktop Linux users. Laptops can be even worse. You have laptops that have, you know, an NVIDIA graphics card that's used for gaming and an Intel iGPU that's used for productivity work, and so when you fire up a game, it switches over to the NVIDIA GPU. That's a really cool thing in some notebooks. It can be a little problematic to support on Linux, but it can also work just fine if you're willing to put in the elbow grease. Now in this video, we've only spent a few minutes going through this, and I've showed you some gotchas, and I've showed you how to recover that Linux single and single no mode set. That can be a lifesaver. If you noticed in our grub menu, there was also a Fedora rescue. Fedora adds sort of a rescue option to their boot menu to try to be a little bit more user-friendly. Some distros do that. OpenSUSE does that. Debian does not do that. Well, Debian kind of does that in recent versions. So most distros have some kind of a feature like that. But when you're using grub2 as your boot manager, you can just go manipulate the command line however you want and basically get in and do whatever it is that you need to do to repair the system, especially when you're messing with video drivers. Of course, failsafe, SSH, don't underestimate the ability to remote into your machine over the network, even though it appears that it has hung hard, because it probably hasn't hung hard. It's probably just the interface and all the other stuff. Don't be ashamed if going through this on your own. It takes you hours and hours to do. Go slow, understand what is happening at every step in the process, and you will be better at this for it. We've only gone through it in a few minutes, but it would not be unusual to spend a couple of hours setting up something like this.